Join us on Patreon and become part of our journey to uncover history's untold stories. Your support helps us create in-depth content, bring hidden narratives to life, and keep history alive for everyone.
In the sun-washed hills of Dimona, a quiet desert city in southern Israel, lives a community whose presence is as enigmatic as it is compelling, a people who, for decades, have followed a vision that many once called impossible. Clad in regal garments of purple and white, singing songs that echo both African rhythms and ancient Hebrew liturgy, they represent one of the most intriguing spiritual migrations of the 20th century. These are the African Hebrew Israelites of Jerusalem, followers of Ben Ammi Ben-Israel, whose story defies simple categorization. It is a tale woven from strands of biblical prophecy, Black liberation theology, diasporic consciousness, and a quest for spiritual and cultural rebirth. Their history is not just about relocation or religion. It is about reclaiming identity, challenging orthodoxy, and constructing a unique model of community that has endured despite formidable odds. The roots of the African Hebrew Israelites of Jerusalem can be traced back to the streets of Chicago in the 1960s, a city simmering with social unrest and yearning for Black empowerment. Amid the civil rights movement and the rise of Black nationalism, a spiritual awakening was stirring among African Americans seeking to reconnect with a heritage severed by centuries of enslavement and displacement. In this context, the figure of Ben Carter emerged, a factory worker and former member of the Nation of Islam who would later take the name Ben Ammi Ben-Israel. In 1966, Ben Ammi claimed to have received a vision from the angel Gabriel, who commanded him to lead his people, the African descendants of the biblical Israelites, back to the Promised Land. Ben Ammi's theological worldview was shaped by both the Old Testament and a radical reinterpretation of Black identity. He believed that African Americans were the true descendants of the ancient Israelites, exiled from their land and stripped of their knowledge and culture through slavery and colonization. To him, the transatlantic slave trade was not merely a historical atrocity, it was a spiritual exile, foretold in the Torah, akin to the Babylonian captivity. Redemption, then, would require a return not just to the land of Israel, but to a lifestyle rooted in divine law, righteousness, and communal self-sufficiency. Rather than immediately immigrating to Israel, Ben Ammi led his followers to Liberia in 1967, a symbolic and logistical waypoint. Liberia, founded by freed American slaves in the 19th century, represented both a return to the African continent and a proving ground for the community's spiritual rebirth. There, the group underwent a period of purification, training, and re-education. They established settlements, adopted a vegan diet inspired by biblical principles, and practiced a rigorous spiritual discipline. However, the conditions in Liberia were harsh, and many fell ill or died. Still, those who survived emerged more committed than ever to the vision of building a new Jerusalem. In 1969, the first wave of African Hebrew Israelites arrived in Israel, believing themselves to be returning home after millennia in exile. But their welcome was far from warm. The Israeli government, rooted in secular Zionism and Orthodox Jewish tradition, was skeptical of their claims. Without formal recognition as Jews under Israeli law, the Hebrew Israelites were classified as tourists or temporary residents, subject to deportation and denied basic social services. Their presence challenged the Israeli state's definitions of Jewish identity and complicated its demographic policies, especially amid the broader Arab-Israeli conflict. Undeterred, the community began to grow. More families arrived, primarily settling in Dimona, but also branching out to Arad and Mitzpe Ramon. Living in overcrowded buildings and often without legal status, the Hebrew Israelites nevertheless created a vibrant and disciplined society. Their way of life was strict and highly organized. Children were educated in their own schools, clothing was handmade and modest, food was organic and plant-based, and music, especially their signature gospel-funk blend, played a key role in religious expression. The community rejected alcohol, tobacco, and drugs, and emphasized family structure, gender roles, and collective economic cooperation. In every aspect of life, they sought to manifest the kingdom of God on earth. For years, their status in Israel remained precarious. Members were arrested or deported, and the community was often portrayed in the Israeli media with suspicion or hostility. But gradually, through persistence and diplomacy, the Hebrew Israelites began to gain recognition. By the early 1990s, some members were granted permanent residency. The community began to integrate into broader Israeli society in limited but significant ways, enlisting in the Israeli military, opening businesses, and forging relationships with local authorities. Their children's fluency in Hebrew and participation in civic life helped soften public perceptions. Ben Ammi, meanwhile, remained the spiritual and administrative leader of the movement until his death in 2014. He maintained an aura of messianic authority, yet also emphasized pragmatic leadership. Under his guidance, the community developed a unique religious philosophy that blended Torah law with Afrocentric principles and health-oriented living. They rejected the label of Judaism in favor of Hebrewism, arguing that their path was a restoration of pre-rabbinical ancient Israelite culture rather than a conversion to modern Jewish religion. They also distanced themselves from the more militant or controversial factions of the broader Black Hebrew Israelite movement in the United States, instead advocating peace, environmentalism, and interfaith dialogue. The legacy of the African Hebrew Israelites of Jerusalem is multifaceted. They are a religious group, an ethnic movement, a political statement, and a cultural phenomenon. To some, they represent a powerful critique of Western modernity and racial injustice, a living example of what Black self-determination can look like. To others, they are a theological anomaly, difficult to place within traditional Jewish or Christian frameworks. Yet they have endured, thriving in a foreign land through self-reliance, unity, and an unwavering belief in their divine mission. Today, the community numbers several thousand and continues to grow. Visitors to Dimona often remark on the group's hospitality, their clean streets, well-run schools, and elaborate religious celebrations. The community runs a range of businesses, from health food enterprises to clothing cooperatives. They have even garnered international attention through their musical ensembles and health practices, often cited as models of holistic living. The story of the African Hebrew Israelites of Jerusalem is not merely about returning to a homeland. It is about transforming exile into destiny and prophecy into daily life. It is a modern exodus, played out not in biblical metaphor, but in real cities, on real soil, under the complex light of modern geopolitics. In their desert homes, under the burning Israeli sun, they continue to pray, to build, to live as Israelites reborn, not as relics of the past, but as forerunners of what they believe is a future ordained by the Most High.